Will you please rise in body or in spirit? Please be seated. Welcome. Welcome to this community of memory and hope, brought into being by so many shared memories and high regard for Dave Durenberger and his beloved wife, Susan Foote. Welcome all to this time and place, both real and virtual, where we gather to remember and to celebrate Dave's long and vital presence in this life. Son, brother, child of the church, husband, father, grandfather, friend, public servant, man of the people. It is fitting that this gathering is happening here at Unity Church-Unitarian, a place that welcomed Dave's expansive spirituality and treasured his warm and generous presence. Today we will gather in the stories that weave a tapestry of living memory that will remain alive for as long as we remember. We are mindful of the many faith traditions that inform our individual journeys, and we hold in gratitude the foundations of love and service that those traditions all hold in common. So in keeping with the Unitarian Universalist tradition practiced at Unity Church, we light this chalice with these words by the Reverend Florence Kaplow. As we kindle this flame, we honor and remember those who have passed into memory. Their brightness lives in our vision, their courage lives in our commitments, and their love continues to bless the world through us. Would you rise in body and spirit and join in the singing of Blue Boat Home, which was one of Dave's favorite hymns that he sang. Please be seated. Well, as we are all aware, Dave Durenberger died on January 31st of this year at the age of 88. As with any public servant ushered into the spotlight by the force of their passion and commitment, this passing received its share of media attention. Details of his life and career were selected and slanted to capture the inquiring minds across the globe. The chronology of his life was captured in his obituary and are summarized in the biographical sketch printed in today's order of service. In February, there was a Mass of Christian burial at St. John's Abbey, which many of you attended, and a community formed and held the foundation of his spiritual and ethical formation from childhood into public life. So why this occasion? Well, because there is a part of Dave's story that is still untold. A larger story that permeates all of the rest. It is a story that holds the center of this whole and vulnerable human life, a story that is shaped by a persistent search for truth and meaning through his love of God and his fellow human beings. This expansive search led to authentic connections with people across generations and cultures, classes and ideologies, theologies and faith traditions, and brought him here to Unity Church, where he was enriched and enriched others by his warmth and his curiosity and his generous spirit. So this gathering is in his honor to celebrate the wholeness of Dave's being. Today, we invite you to hear beneath and beyond the stories of Senator Durenberger into the soul of a true public servant. True public servants do not serve for fame and fortune. True public servants do what they do out of a sense of a higher calling. Trust in the democratic system, in human potential and goodness. It takes true character to remain consistently grounded in a sense of personal integrity and larger purpose in the face of the demands and expectations and projections of public life. Finding and maintaining a relationship with a life-giving and sustaining power that is within and beyond the self is at the heart of staying grounded in that integrity and purpose. Also at the heart is the practice of honoring one's own essential humanity, valuing human relationships, nurturing friendships across ideological and cultural divides. This is the Dave Durenberger whose life we celebrate today. We are grateful to be holding this space for the sharing of this larger story, the love story that is Dave's greatest legacy.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces in this congregation and feel the love in this beautiful space. And to welcome all the family and friends also joining on live stream. As was mentioned, there was a funeral mass for Senator David Durenberger held at St. John's University the week following his death, as it should be. He was duly eulogized by the governor and Senator Klobuchar and by his 4 sons. Family and friends gathered from far and near. He was buried in St. John's Cemetery next to his parents and his grandparents. The funeral respected his wishes and was masterfully organized by his son David, who's here today. But today, as was said, is not a funeral. It's a celebration of a long life well lived, and it's here because Dave loved Unity Church and the people here. And while it's not easy for me now to speak publicly of my beloved husband, friend, and partner, I felt it was critically and deeply important to share his story, our story, of how Unity Church and all of you enriched our lives. And I'm also looking forward to hearing the collage of voices as you remember what he meant to you. In the last decade of his life, Dave began to refer to himself as a Catholic Unitarian. Well, that raised some eyebrows, to say the least. People asked, or they thought, how in the world, or even probably, what the hell? Well, you can lower your eyebrows, because now I'm here to tell you why. Our Dave Durenberger was blessed with an inquiring mind, an abiding interest in people, their experiences, their dreams, their needs, their fears, and an open and totally non-judgmental disposition. His respect for others took root among the Benedictine monks at St. John's, but flourished and expanded as he grew and moved beyond the confines of Stearns County into the state of Minnesota as a lawyer and then chief of staff to the governor. And then when he was elected to the Senate, at what seems now at this distance like the really young age of 44, into the wider world. During those Senate years, he joined small prayer groups with his fellow senators. These were multi-denominational, with Jews, including Republican Arlen Specter and Democrat Joe Lieberman, Protestants of all stripes and all political parties, and Catholic colleagues alike. Dave strongly believed that partisan politics had no place in these settings. He was very active in the National Prayer Breakfast and broadened his reach to befriend a wide group of leaders from all over the world. He loved to travel, especially to East Africa, Burundi, Uganda, the Congo, and in Asia, India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh were among those nations whose leaders were his personal friends. He wanted to learn what moved them, what inspired them, what grounded them, what uplifted them. When he traveled with an international Christian group, he sought to share his beliefs and learn from others. Dave Durenberger was never a proselytizer. He was a respectful fellow traveler in seeking a higher common ground. Dave was a friend of Mother Teresa, who was invited to the International Prayer Breakfast as a speaker in 1994. In fact, that year he had to intervene because the DC Archbishop decided not to permit her to come, even though she was already en route, because he was miffed. He thought he hadn't been properly consulted before the invitation had been offered. Dave was called upon, as the good Catholic senator, to smooth the feathers of the angry archbishop, and her visit was approved. And hanging in his office is a picture of Mother Teresa taken that day, inscribed, "To dear Dave, God bless you." So Dave was comfortable with Catholic luminaries, but equally comfortable with those of other faiths. He considered King Hussein of Jordan, a Sunni Muslim, as a friend. He visited him in his home in Jordan, and he told the story that when the car drove up and pulled into the garage, there were all these toys in the garage, and Dave said to the king, "I didn't know kings had bicycles in their garages." He also visited Hussein at the Mayo Clinic when he underwent cancer treatments. They prayed together at his bedside, and Dave carried Hussein's business card in his wallet. When the king gave him his card, Dave had quipped he didn't know kings had business cards either. There are so many stories like this. Dave respected differences. He believed that diverse religions should bring people together. not tear them apart. In the practice of his own Catholic faith, it's interesting to note the churches that he chose to attend himself. In Washington, D.C., in the later years in the Senate, he went to St. Augustine's, which was a Black Catholic church in Washington, D.C. Here in St. Paul, he attended St. Peter Claver, a small cinder block church in the old Rondo neighborhood, also serving Catholics in the Black community. He always was there for the spirit and the community, never for the pomp and circumstance. And he had his own spiritual practice. Every morning with a cup of coffee, which he often sloshed on the rug on his way to his special chair, with his missals and his readings and his prayer list and his notebooks and his crucifix, a beautiful modern wooden carved art object, really, willed to him by the senator from Washington State, Scoop Jackson, a Democrat and a friend. For decades, literally decades, he met with a small Catholic prayer group in the Twin Cities, where they engaged in serious conversation about topics related to their faith. Dave Zoomed with this group, and some of them are here today, until the last days of his life, probably the last 1 or 2 days of his life. Some of those devoted friends, as I said, are here today. So where do these Unitarian Universalists come into the picture? In 1995, Arthur Foote, who had been my father-in-law, wrote me a letter, and he said he loved me and wanted to meet Dave, my new husband, and invited us to his home in Southwest Harbor, Maine. He was a widower then, in his mid-80s, long retired from Unity Church. He was the minister here for 25 years, from 1945 to 1970, and there are a few people here in the audience that remember those long ago days. We accepted, and on that Saturday, Arthur and Dave immediately bonded. Dave nosed around Arthur's extensive library, which was one of his favorite things to do. They discussed a range of ideas and experiences. They reminisced about politics in Minnesota. And when Arthur announced that he always had 1 martini before dinner, Dave was hooked. I basked in the lamplight as evening fell in the company of 2 men I deeply loved, enjoying each other so much. At the end of the evening, Dave asked Arthur if there was a Catholic church in town. He wanted to attend the next morning. Arthur asked if he could come with us. So the 3 of us, the Reverend Foote and Dave Durenberger, and I went, and after the service, as Dave retrieved the car, Arthur turned to me and said, "I always try to keep an open mind, but I'm not sure I can get with this form of worship." How Unitarian is that? Age 86, in ill health, still trying to keep an open mind. Dave and Arthur, from different but equally deep faith traditions, soulmates, intellectual compatriots, friends, both with open minds. We visited Arthur several times in the next 2 years. We moved to Minnesota in 1999, the same year that Arthur passed away. But his influence continued. He had given Dave his book, Taking Down the Defenses, which was a collection of brief essays and meditations. Dave integrated this book into his spiritual practice. And the other day, I found it in the bookcase. It was the paperback version, heavily marked up by Dave with important passages. But characteristically, tucked inside those pages of Arthur Foote's meditations were other pages torn from his favorite Catholic missal, Give Us This Day, notes from his Catholic prayer group, and printouts of the scripture of the day, which were written by his dear friend, Steve Moore, who's with us today. And also tucked inside the book was the picture of Arthur Foote and Dave that's in your program. When we moved to St. Paul, we were practically in the shadow of Unity Church, but we didn't attend. We'd crossed paths with Rob and Jan a few times, and they had even performed my son's wedding. But in 2011, when I was helping my son Ben move from his St. Paul home, a bag of papers fell on his head that were papers of the mental health reform effort that had been spearheaded by Arthur Foote and Unity Church and had been sent to him from his Aunt Fran when she cleared out Arthur's possessions long after he died. Ben didn't know what to do with them, so they sat on his top of his closet for many years, and that story I've told because that was the material that led me on my path to the book about this church's effort called the Crusade for Forgotten Souls. But at that time, I was just beginning my research, and I wanted to see what additional material might be in Unity Church archives. Dave encouraged me to call Jan. She and I spent time going over the old papers in her office, and those of you who love and know Jan will like this. She said to me, "Well, Susan, we really don't have archives, but if you come to church on Sunday, I'll introduce you to the people who want to start an archives committee." Now, how Unitarian was that? I see in the audience some of the people that became the archives committee. So Dave urged me to go the next Sunday and the next. He knew in his heart that I needed a place like Unity. And my Sunday ritual was to do the New York Times puzzle while Dave went to St. Peter Claver. So early on, Dave said, "I'd like to go to Unity too. I'll meet you there." And he would go to 8 o'clock Mass at St. Peter Claver and then hurry over, and I would save him a seat at the 9 o'clock service here. And as I've thought about this, I think it was likely Dave's way of ensuring that I would actually come and not be diverted by the New York Times puzzles. But then it became an important place for both of us. But also in thinking about it, once early on, Dave was trying not to be late, and he strolled down the aisle right there and turned to go into the pew and genuflected to the ficus tree. A Catholic Unitarian or a Unitarian Catholic, you make your choice. We both fell in love with Unity, with the community, with the fellowship, with the wise, moving, and always thought-provoking sermons. We went on the Boston pilgrimage. He always wept on the Memorial Day service. And during the pandemic, when we were watching by live stream, and Reverend K.P. Hong, who's handles the religious education, would say to the children watching the TV, "Children, come closer to the screen and listen to the story." And Dave would lean in and listen too. He was always listening and learning here at Unity. There are so many memories. But it was also the people. He would always say after his donut in the parish hall, "These are such good people." Dave never abandoned his Catholic faith. With his open heart, his capacious curiosity, his love and respect for all people, he embraced his spirituality and he expanded it to include the wider world and all of us here. Dave took down his own defenses. He always reached out to meet people, never halfway. He met them where they were. So today we celebrate his wonderful life, and let us thank God, or whatever form the Spirit moves us, for his presence in our lives. And I'd like to conclude with a passage from Arthur's book, which had double stars and a circle around it in Dave's hand. "So may I go from today into each tomorrow as one determined to be himself and to be a doer of the works of righteousness and truth, and not a hearer only. I would live as one stubbornly seeking fully to be before he dies, as one fully awakened to his true estate, as a shareholder in the spiritual magnificence which is revealed to man in his finest, truest moments of insight. And so he did, and we all love him for it. Thank you.
Dave Durenberger's faith was at the center of his life. And although he had many roles throughout his life, senator, politician, husband, father, grandfather, friend, colleague, just to name a few, woven throughout all of these was a commitment to the life of the Spirit. As you heard in Susan's reflection, he remained a devout Catholic his entire life, and that devotion to his Catholic roots did not narrow his perspective. Instead, it revealed the depth and the breadth of his relationship with the holy, which was not bound by creeds or dogmas or denomination. He practiced as an ecumenical Christian, living out the root of the word ecumenical, oikumenes, which simply means belonging to the Church Universal. So in this sense, in the largest sense of the word, he was a universalist, because he knew that God's love was abundant and available to all, and he lived into that love unto his last breath. It is fitting then that we offer a prayer of both thanksgiving and gratitude for Dave Durenberger's life of service and practice and prayer. Dave's friend, Bill Hipsch, adapted the Lord's Prayer in a way that would have very much spoken to Dave Durenberger's ecumenical heart. So there are two parts to this prayer. The first is preparing our hearts for the prayer, and the second is an adaptation of the Lord's Prayer. So I invite you now to enter into this time of prayer with this time of shared silence as we prepare our hearts to receive these words. We turn our hearts now to you, our beloved divine companion, standing before you with awe, reverence, and gratitude. You are the author of our very being, the eternal source of love, and the origin and energy of life. You are the anointed and beloved one, abiding with us as teacher, healer, and friend. You are the gift of holy wisdom, filling our hearts with your Spirit. We bow to your presence in all creation and open ourselves to your presence within us. Our Father, our Mother of love, you bring together heaven and earth, and your very name is holy. May your reign be established among us as we follow your way of life. May we see that we have enough bread to sustain ourselves and feed the world. May we know forgiveness and grace as we pardon those who offend us. May we not fail when facing temptation and be safe when facing evil. For the kingdom of love, the power of healing, and the glory of mercy begin and end with you. And let the people say, Amen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Durenberger. I'm one of Dave's sons, and it's really heartwarming to see this orchid here. He's embodied in that today, and he is not genuflecting at the ficus. He is instead genuflecting towards you folks today. So we're very appreciative that you're here. I'm going to read a speech that he gave last August 25th. It was the occasion of his 88th birthday and his and Susan's 27th wedding anniversary. Welcome to all of you. It's a joy to see your faces. You are each a part of a family of friends who have shared and shaped my life and its values for all of my 88 years. Bringing all of us together today is the best way Susan and our family, all of us, can say thank you. As I was thinking about what I might tell all of you today, I was taken aback by a comment made at Farm Fest this month of the Republican candidate for governor of Minnesota. He said, "Let farmers farm, let miners mine, let teachers teach, and get government the hell out of the way." This view of government is antithetical to my core values. Take it from me, one who once aspired to that office of governor of Minnesota back in 1978. In this grand democracy, government is not a nuisance, not an evil force. People elect public servants. I learned from my family, from my education at St. John's, and all the years since then, the shared value of civic engagement. I spent my life in public service in the community, in local organizations, in this wonderful state of Minnesota as Chief of Staff to Governor Harold Levander, in community service working for one of our greats, Governor Elmer Anderson. Then I was given the gift by the people of Minnesota of serving 3 terms in the United States Senate. So many of you here were role models for me. You worked with me, taught me so much. Each in your own way, you carried forward those shared values. From those of you old-timers in Levander years, from those of you who were my earliest supporters, part of the brigades of knocking on doors. Others of you here worked in my Senate offices here in Minnesota and Washington, listening to constituents, hearing their concerns, and working on solutions. And what I learned from Minnesotans. So many of you with so much passion and incredible talents, the leading edge of healthcare and the environment, and our love for parks and trails, our great Mississippi River, advocates for rights for those denied them. The Americans with Disabilities Act, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, creation of national parks and recreation areas, Women's Equity Act, the National and Community Service Act, fairer and more transparent tax bills, to name just a few. We worked across the aisle with our colleagues from the other party. We sought to agree on a problem, and though we often debated long and hard about what was the best solution, we worked to find consensus to move the nation forward. Just last year, over 20 years after I retired, Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, called me to say that he and Senator Grassley, a Republican from Iowa, were reminiscing that when encountering a thorny health care issue in the Finance Committee with much division among the members, they would say, "Give it to Dave," because I was committed to bring the members together to resolve our differences. Some of you here have been part of my post-Senate years at St. Thomas and the Institute of Health Policy, the Medical Technology Leadership Forum, and been engaged in challenging issues for the city of St. Paul with St. Paul Strong. To all of you who are carrying on important work of building community, so many of you continue to carry the banner of service. I'm cheering you on. And know how grateful I am to all of you for your friendship and guidance over all these years. I hope I've been a role model and positive force in the lives of my sons and my grandchildren. I know you made sacrifices so I could pursue my career. Forgive me for my mistakes and know how much I love you and admire you for the lives you have built. And to my grandchildren, I have so much pride watching you learn and grow and take on the world on your own. Finally, my deepest thanks go to my Susie, who picked me up off the ground 27 years ago and has loved me with compassion, understanding, and patience. Thank you for making the last decades of my life so happy and getting me to age 88. And when Dad was first elected to the Senate in '78, then President Carter invited all the newly elected senators to the White House, and the entertainment for that event was Arlo Guthrie. And they all stood. President Carter said, "Let's all stand, join hands, and sing 'This Land Is Our Land.'" So in that spirit, we invite you all to do that right now.
Well, it is a tradition at Unity Church-Unitarian at this time in the memorial services, and this is a celebration service, but we're going to do it anyway, to share a collage of voices. Many of these are excerpts from longer entries, and the entries themselves will be shared with the family in their entirety.
This is from Louise West Duffy, Dave's press secretary, his last term in office. When Dave Durenberger was persuaded to abandon his quest for Minnesota governor to run instead for the U.S. Senate seat, then occupied by Hubert Humphrey, it was seen as a lost cause by many. I had met Durenberger once as a candidate for governor when I was a reporter for the Albert Lea Tribune. Candidate Dave told me he felt called to public service. As Dave slogged around the state, introducing himself to prospective voters, we got interviews with local newspapers and radio stations. He showed himself to be a thoughtful listener who really cared about what mattered to Minnesotans. Dave told me that on a cold December day, when he was still running for governor, he stopped for gas in a small town in northern Minnesota. A luxurious black sedan pulled up on the other side of the gas pump. As was his style, Dave got out and strode over to greet the occupants. Hubert Humphrey himself rolled down the car window. "Hello, Senator," Dave said, offering his hand to shake. "I'm Dave Durenberger, and I'm running for governor." "I know who you are, young man," Humphrey responded, "and I like what I'm hearing. You just keep on doing what you're doing, and you'll be elected come November." It felt like a benediction to Dave, a blessing from the great man himself, though he was asked to run for the U.S. Senate instead. Humphrey's prediction came true. Though it wasn't the election he expected, he won the Humphrey seat that he went on to hold for a total of 16 years.
And this from William Mullen. Our friendship began in 1980 when the Republican senator undertook a major effort to help out a Democratic St. Paul mayor. This was a great example of bipartisan success. Dave publicly and many times in conversations lamented the political passing of bipartisanship to serve the common good, to serve only short-term political purposes. Dave was a nationally recognized leader in healthcare while in the Senate and for the rest of his life. Starting in 1991, he had a rich multi-level healthcare partnership working with his future wife, Susan Foote. The two would frequently consult with and advise public officials and private providers in the healthcare sector throughout the country. Dave frequently praised Susan's strength, insight, and focus in their healthcare successes, as well as her tireless devotion to him. They were a great team.
From Jane L. Prince. When I began my career in local government in the late 70s, I was awestruck that a U.S. Senator was on the ground working with us, a powerful advocate for the urban core, health care, and the environment. Senator Durenberger led the way with Congressman Bruce Vento to preserve and protect our precious river's critical area by turning it into a national park, the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area. Fast forward to my first year on the City Council, facing pressures to amend our riverfront zoning to allow development close to the river's edge. Again, Senator Durenberger stepped up to remind elected officials of the historic covenant we had made years earlier to protect our Mississippi River. Selfless, a true statesman, a beautiful man.
And from Marg Walker. One afternoon, when I was a graduate student at the Humphrey Institute, a classmate rushed into the library to announce that she had been accepted for an internship in Washington with Senator Dave Durenberger. "But Lynn," we said, "he's a Republican." How foolish the certainties of youth. As soon as I began to actually learn something about the man, my respect for him took root and has not only grown from there through his long career and more recently through our friendship. I am so grateful.
From Carol and Denny Miller. We invited Susan and Dave to visit us on our balcony overlooking the confluence of the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers. We knew how involved Dave had been in the rebirth of the river, and we wanted them to see the rivers from our vantage point. When they arrived, we were offering beverages to them and had the usual drinks or root beer floats, and Dave jumped at the offer of that. He loved root beer floats. It's been one of our most popular beverages ever since, thanks to Dave. We miss him.
And from Kurt Johnson, I was among his many friends. He was always a straight shooter, mincing no words in replying about anything. Both qualities are rare for people who spent a good part of their careers in public life.
Barbie Byers wrote, Dave greeted people, ideas, and life with a smile and openness. I can still see him walking on a sidewalk in sun and shade, hands behind his back, contemplating life in reflection, at peace.
Jack Roxman writes, several years ago, I was wearing my green Mentor name tag during the Unity coffee hour. Dave asked what that meant, and I said, "Would you like to be my mentee?" He said, "Sure." And this led to many luncheons at the Downtowner and a friendship for Marty and me with Dave and Susan. I learned more about Dave's deep roots at St. John's University and gained an understanding of his effectiveness as a progressive Republican senator during the early political era. I am already missing those luncheon conversations. And now, a word from Gary Eichten of Minnesota Public Radio.
Hey, darling, just wondering, and it's really none of my business, but have you ever voted for a Republican?
What? Absolutely not.
Did you ever come close to voting for a Republican?
No way. Well, maybe. Durenberger later, after I got to know him, and he called me a pistol. He was a riot. How about you? Have you ever voted for a Republican?
Well, as a news guy, I can't say who I voted for, Democrat, Republican, Independent. But I do believe Dave Durenberger was one of Minnesota's best and most effective U.S. senators, and he made a real difference after he left the Senate, what with all his work on healthcare policy, the environment, and the like.
And didn't you have him on your midday show quite often?
Oh, I sure did, talking politics, healthcare, intelligence. He was a great guest, especially when he was on with his wife, Susan, the professor, as we called her. Dave would tell me that Susan should handle all the complicated health policy questions and that he, U.S. Senator, would handle the big picture.
Gosh, we had a lot of fun with him, didn't we, darling? And that's even though he was a Republican.
This we know. All life is a gift. Dave Durenberger's life was a gift. His passion and commitment to clean air and clean water, his care for his concern for the access to health care, equal rights for women, support for the disability community, protection for the environment in all ways, live on in the legislation that is associated with his time in the Senate and beyond. His open and inclusive approach to spirituality and faith are an inspiration to all curious seekers. His willingness and his capacity to bridge differences that immobilize progress toward common good may be the greatest hope for the future of our nation and maybe the world. His open-hearted welcome of the stranger lives at the heart of beloved community. Dave's unique expression of these gifts will be missed, but they need not be lost. They are now in our hearts and in our hands. We honor and extend this legacy each time we act to protect a natural resource, appreciate the beauty of the wilderness, support the rights of others, pray without ceasing to a mystery, and extend the power of love and service. And each time we welcome a stranger with genuine warmth and interest and listen with curiosity as we live into the beauty and richness of our differences, as we make Dave Durenberger's legacy our own. Please join me now in the singing of Love Calls Us On. And now may the peace which passes understanding, which the world can neither give nor take away, and the living spirit of Dave Durenberger carry us all forward in the spirit of love and service. Go in peace. But please join Susan and the family in the parish hall for refreshments and the sharing, I'm sure, of many, many more stories.